All right, well, here's a few news articles that I thought were interesting. So we've known for a while that the nightmare of OT security is becoming real. People have been threatening for years and talking about SCADA attacks. Nation states are now attacking critical infrastructure. The Iranians attacked a water district pump, and Volt Typhoon is a Chinese attack that's been attacking strategic sites. And now there's this thing called Pipe Dream, which they say is Cobalt Strike for OT. So sort of like Metasploit, an attacking tool has appeared to generally perform attacks on OT, and therefore we can expect random hackers to start doing it. So it's the natural evolution of things. First, the nation-state attackers do it because they're knowledgeable and well-resourced, and then as it gets easier and easier, your low-level criminal gangs do it. So that's why I'm teaching an OT security class and consulting on it and stuff. People are increasingly concerned about operational technology security, and rightly so. And speaking of which, I think I'll go to this. I was real pleased to get this project working a couple days ago. This is the still from the Israeli attack on an Iranian steel mill. And at this point, they have tricked the steel conveyor belt into dumping the molten steel on the ground instead of into the pot it was supposed to go into. And this is the workers running away before the molten steel hits them. So the workers barely got away without getting killed, and the whole place burned down. And this was done with a cyber attack. And so I was very pleased to get this project where you get to simulate that in a very simple case. There is a product called Factory.io that lets you see a simulated factory floor with the equipment on it, and then you can practice controlling it with ICS systems. So the Factory.io has a simple conveyor belt with a box, and it has a sensor at the end to avoid having the box fall off the end. And you write the program that controls that and put it in this product called OpenPLC, which is a programmable logic controller, which is what people use for this and the simulation of it. And then you install it in a Linux-based OpenPLC runtime, which simulates the actual hardware, and run it. And after that, you can automate this factory so that the box won't fall off the end. And then you can load up Metasploit and attack it. And so first you demonstrate it working as intended, then you install Metasploit, and Metasploit has a few Modbus attacks. Modbus is the oldest, most common protocol used for factory equipment like this. And it has, and you're able to scan for active slave units and find one, and then you can write to it. So you can read data from the slave, and you can write data to the slave to start the conveyor. Now, if you just write directly to the slave trying to turn on the conveyor, it won't come on because the existing PLC will turn it off. So you have to stop the PLC from turning it off before you turn it on. And that's pretty easy to do on an Ethernet network. You could just do a ARP poisoning attack to redirect the traffic from the other device. In this case, we just turn it off manually. And after that, you can dump the box off the end with an attack. So, it's a very simplified version of showing how that attack works. But this is what everyone's afraid of. Once you get control, you can change what the automated equipment does. So anyway, that's what people are worried about. I'm glad to get a simple simulation of it working in the OT class. Now let me get to the, okay, no comments there, fair enough. All right, so mod security has a path confusion. This is a fairly common problem. A mod security is an Apache module to filter incoming traffic as a web application firewall to stop known attacks. And the problem is URLs are very complicated. And in particular, what it does is it searches for a question mark. And it assumes whatever's before the question mark is the folder, and what's after that are parameters, and it filters them differently. And apparently, it is possible to use a question mark in a folder name under certain conditions and confuse it. So this is the kind of thing that tends to happen. There are so many different ways to express things in the web that there's a way to sneak things past the filter, and it's been this way for a long time. This keeps on happening. Anything that tries to detect malicious input to web apps is very likely to fail because there are so many different ways to encode data going into web apps. So Google has made an AI fuzzer Now, fuzzers are things that send random data to programs to see where they crash, and one thing about them is they tend to only cover a small percentage of the program code, so they claim by having an AI-generated fuzzer, they can cover like 30% more of your code, and therefore more efficiently test your security. And after the AI finds a vulnerability, it will patch it, which is not that surprising now that we have large language models that can write code. I don't know how good the code is, but the code keeps getting better and better, and more coding products are coming out, like Microsoft Copilot and their competitors. So anyway, Google now has this open source product which will scan with AI and patch with AI. And so they say it resolved 15% of the targeted bugs. So it's not terribly impressive, but it's a start. It's the open source start. Anyway, that's an interesting bit of technology improvement to go. And here's Thieving Fox. Now, in some of my classes, we steal passwords from a password manager. It is outrageously easy. If you gain code execution on someone's box, the passwords in the password manager are just sitting in memory, unencrypted in a process at all times, which I was sort of horrified to find out. And I guess until I found out that they all work that way, nobody cares because it seems to be necessary. It seems to be the only way to make them work without constantly harassing you, making you put in the master password every time you use it. But that does mean anybody that can run execute code on your box can steal all the passwords. And here's Thieving Fox. Thieving Fox is an automated tool to do it. We do it manually with just HXD, just looking at Linux. But you can install this thing, and it will now steal data from any version of Windows, and it'll steal it from KeyPass and Windows login screen and a whole bunch of other things. So a sort of interesting tool. I never heard of Spoutable is apparently a Twitter alternative, and it had an open API, unprotected. This is what keeps on happening. You have APIs that are listening to requests to do things, and one of them was unprotected, and so it coughed up passwords and tokens and all sorts of things. Reminds me of the Indian app that I gave a talk at DEF CON about a couple of years ago, where I could just get everybody's password by just asking their API. It was unprotected. So anyway, this tends to happen over and over and over, unprotected API endpoints. And so this one's kind of fun. This is a guy ranting about what you usually have, and his point is why things happen at companies. He explains how in the management is typically non-technical and doesn't understand security or care about it. They just want compliance. And so they talk about how you hire somebody and you get a consultant and they just do something that doesn't improve security. It's interesting to read. This is more or less true. This is sort of expressing the common frustrations of this field. Security people are really mad, and management just sort of wants to paper over things. Anyway, it's kind of a fun rant. Not all companies are this bad, though. I'm consulting for companies that take security pretty seriously, but a lot of companies just see security as a waste of their time and try to do the minimum possible. And so Florida is taking up a bill to ban kids from having social media accounts. A lot of people want this. The guy on the, Scott Galloway is always saying he wants to age-gate social media because he's very convinced by a psychologist who has published a bunch of studies showing that when social media became popular in 2012, the rate of girls' self-harm and suicidal ideation went way up. And so there are a lot of people that believe that young girls are injured by Instagram. Because, and I haven't heard an explanation of exactly why, but I think it's because they look at Instagram and all the other girls are impossibly pretty and rich and having all this fun, and they feel inferior by comparison. Yeah?
Instagram actually knows and knew that their algorithm was doing this,
yeah,
and tried to suppress it.
Yeah, but so the Instagram had shown that their product made girls depressed. Nobody ever figured out exactly why, I suppose. But yeah, just like the cigarette companies, they knew it was bad and did it anyway. And yeah, anyway, so now they're trying to ban kids from having social media accounts, which will sound good to legislators, but the problem is, how do you identify a kid online? How do you get, unless you're going to make them sign in with a credit card to prove they're an adult, I don't know how you're going to do it. And Britain has tried to pass laws outlawing kids seeing porn online. So they've tried to have a third-party registrar where everybody who wants to see porn has to submit their ID card and keep it in a database, and then what happens is they'll lose that data, of course. And so people are very, very unhappy about that, the privacy advocates and other people. And this is what keeps happening. You have some rule that sounds good, and implementing it on the web is very difficult. And kids, of course, are very experienced at lying about their age to get through the website. So that's the problem. You might think this is a desirable outcome, but it's not clear at all how to actually do it on the web. Anyway, I think that's enough of this.